get together and share their experiences and their stories with one another, because what I find often happens is that women realize that our experiences are more alike than we think. And when you notice that and you hear your story echoed in another person's story, you find a connectedness, and you find that you're not actually alone in what you're going through. I'm really excited to be partnering once again with the Motherhood Center, because I think that we're both aligned in our mission to change the narrative of what motherhood is, to include not only the beauty and the love and the joy of having a baby, but also the stuff that fucking sucks, and like the vulnerable parts and the struggle and the things that are yucky and hard and raw. So I'm gonna let Paige introduce herself and tell you guys about this wonderful space that we're in.
Well, we're so happy to have found Alexis, because what we do here all day is talk about the nitty-gritty, dirty side of motherhood. And so you are all in a place called the Motherhood Center, and we are the first of its kind treatment facility that is not connected to a hospital, that provides treatment to pregnant and new moms that are having a really hard time making it through the transition to motherhood, right? Like, it's hard for all of us, and there's different gradations of difficulty, right? Like, there's what we all have heard about, the baby blues. It's the first week or two where we're really struggling and we're exhausted and we're emotional and we perhaps feel irritated. But what we do here at the Motherhood Center is we treat you one step further, right? And so I don't know if anybody here knows, but statistics suggest that 1 in 5 women suffer from or experience a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder, aka postpartum depression. That's what we all hear about. So what we do here is we treat that. We treat depression and anxiety and OCD and bipolar in the pregnancy period and also in the postpartum period. And we do that through offering support groups, individual therapy, medication management, and what we're really, really known for is our day program, where moms that are having a really hard time making it through the day, and my God, how many of us have been there, can come and be here 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. We have an on-site nursery. We provide all kinds of therapeutic support groups. Everybody's followed by an individual therapist, a reproductive psychiatrist who specializes in medication during pregnancy, and we help moms get better. And our whole mission is, and why we align so well with Alexis and Not Safe for Mom, is like, we're talking about like the really dark side of being a mom, right? The part that's really hard when we're feeling depressed, we're feeling anxious, we're feeling rageful, we're feeling all these things, and it's having an impact on our ability to function on a daily basis. It's causing us an immense amount of distress, and so that's what we're here for. So I'm really happy to have all of you guys in here, and I hope nobody has suffered from depression or anxiety or OCD or anything else. If you have and you're still going through it, know we're here. If you meet a new or expecting mom that appears to feel distressed, please let her know we're here. And being somebody who went through this myself, and I am so lucky that my son and I are still here 12 years later. I get it. And my partner, Catherine, in the back gets it. She's a reproductive psychiatrist. It's amazing. So our whole commitment is to change the conversation around the struggles of becoming a new mom. And I always like to talk with really cool people. It makes me feel important.
Okay, I'm going to introduce you to the panelists that we have here tonight. And I just want to say we had another panelist, Sue Heidi, loves to Heidi. She cannot be here. She's a single mom, and her partner became violently ill tonight, like about a couple hours ago. He was watching their kid, and now she has to go watch the kid. So she apologizes. She's really sorry that she can't be part of tonight. She was really looking forward to it. But for the wonderful people that are here, next to me is Dr. Logan Levkoff. She's an internationally recognized expert on sexuality, parenting, and relationships. A thought leader in the field, Logan frequently appears on television, including Good Morning America, The Today Show, and CNN. She was also the host of Cafe Mom's show Mom Ed in the Bedroom, and was a sexuality expert for the first 3 seasons of the breakout hit, the A&E television show Married at First Sight. Logan is the author of multiple books, including Got Teens, The Dr. Mom's Guide to Sexuality, Social Media, and Adolescent Realities. She's a public speaker and a trusted source for numerous publications. She lives in New York City with her husband, son, and daughter. Dr. Maria Shifrin. Oh, okay, wait, I'm going to go to, all right, let's go to Jancee in order. Okay, so Jancee Dunn is a New York Times bestselling author. She's the author of 6 books, among them the one that you saw on your way in, How Not to Hate Your Husband After Kids. And I'm sure many of you have read it. And a children's book called I'm Afraid Your Teddy is in Trouble Today. Her latest book is a collaboration with Karamo Brown from Queer Eye. Among other publications, she writes for Vogue, Travel and Leisure, the New York Times, and Parents. She lives in Brooklyn with her husband and daughter. Dr. Maria Shifrin is a clinical psychologist located in Midtown Manhattan. Though her expertise applies to helping a wide range of individuals, Shifrin's practice is geared towards providing care to moms, dads, and couples struggling with adjusting to and finding satisfaction in parenthood while balancing the pressures of everyday life. As a wife and mother of 2, Shifrin is a strong advocate for helping parents achieve and maintain mental well-being. Her ultimate goal is to help her clients recognize that they have control over their life, choices, and relationships. Thank you guys for tonight.
Thank you.
And taking care of all the child care related to your sick children. I know we have many sick children at home. So just some announcements, housekeeping. If anything comes up that's like super heavy and you need to take a moment, just feel free to go to the back, get a glass of wine. We also are so lucky to have Elizabeth here, Elizabeth Schoenbach. She's a clinical psychologist you can just talk to her at any point that you need to. Take a breather. Also, when I throw some questions out to the audience, if you can keep it brief, that would be appreciated. We just can't do any life stories so that we can, get to as much material as possible here. And I think that's it for, the housekeeping. Okay, so let's talk about the mental load, because that's something that you have been seeing from all of my invitations, and it's here. I'm sitting with this, beautiful lady. What is it? It's basically the stuff that you're thinking while I'm talking to you right now. It's all the to-do lists that you have in your head. It's the housework that you do. It's the caretaking that you do. It's the Amazon list. It's the gift you have to buy for so-and-so's birthday party. It's, oh crap, we ran out of toilet paper and I'm the one responsible for buying it. It's putting on the happy face when you come home from a crappy day at work because your kids are going to be running into your arms and you just want to show up for them in a really nice way. It's the chair that your husband just can't seem to remember to push in at the end of the night after he takes off the shoes. I just don't know why that's so hard to ask, and all the socks that you have to pick up off the floor. It's all of that stuff, and it tends to fall disproportionately on a woman's shoulders. And for a while, many of us are okay with that. We can do a lot. As women, we're really excellent multitaskers. We're pretty amazing at handling a huge amount of work. Like, amazing. But after a while, we're not superhuman, and it can really become a little bit too much. And so what happens is, we do this thing called, asking for some help. It's crazy. So we might ask for some assistance with that load, or we might ask for someone to take, our partner to take some of it on themselves, which is called participating in being a parent. Or we might just ask for some goddamn recognition, you know? Like, just to hear that, you know, you do such a great job, babe. It's really amazing all the things that you do for our family. And when these things don't happen, when you don't get that recognition, or when you don't get that help from your partner, it can be profoundly disappointing. It can be really hurtful or rage-inducing, because when you're not seen and you're not heard, I mean, this is the person that you chose to have another small person with. You want them to see you, you want them to hear you. And then compounding all of this, you're hit with the social media images of like other people's perfect partners. Hashtag super dad, hashtag dad does it all. And you're looking at your partner who's
By the way,
like,
you know what I say to that? Never gonna, I mean.
He's like wearing the yarn and doing the laundry and making the mac and cheese.
Maybe for 30 seconds.
For 30 seconds. And yeah, so it can be a lot. And then you wonder though, is this my fault? Am I not asking the right way? Am I not asking nicely enough of my partner? Or maybe should I just shut up and like take what I've got? You know, I got this perfect kid. I got the kid I asked for. I'm just so lucky as a mother. Like, I really shouldn't push any further. Or maybe like you don't make the money. So, you know, your partner's the one who does the lion's share workload-wise, you know, work-wise, career-wise. So you really shouldn't complain. So these are myths. And that's why I want to bring us all here tonight so we can share and validate these feelings. But I don't want to end there, because that's not enough. This is not just going to be like a bitch session about how shitty, you know, people's partnerships are. But we should go the next step. And that's why I brought these people here, because I think they can really help us understand the dynamics of our relationships, what we bring to the table, because we are playing a part, because there's tools that we can use and better language. And so that's what I'm looking forward to bringing to all of you tonight. But we should start at the beginning, because I don't think anyone goes into this making a baby thing with the idea of like, I just can't wait to have a baby and then do all the work by myself and my partner's life remains relatively unchanged. You know, you go into it with a plan, whether spoken or unspoken, that there's going to be a shared load, a shared sense of responsibility when it comes to the parenting. But at some point, that system breaks down. And I'd like to understand that disconnect, and I wanted to start with Jancee. You talked about in your book about millennial dads, and how I think you had mentioned some studies about how they're like more than the dads of the past. They're really into the idea of being co-parents and like sharing 50% of the load, but then something happens.
Then the baby's born. Oops. Yeah. So there's this famous Ohio State study, among many others, that yes, this new generation of guys, they really are very evolved, and they understand, you know, they divvy up the workload before the baby is there. The chores, maybe if it's not done 50-50, at least it's somewhat equitable. But then when the baby was born, these researchers went back after the baby it was two parents that both worked. And then 9 months later, when the baby was 9 months old, they went back and found that women picked up 37 extra hours of work per week. That's a lot. That's a lot of childcare and housework. And it just happens insidiously. It happens in little ways and big ways. You all know. It's like, oh, I'm just going to pick up the Legos. You know, it's just easier for me to do it. Or if you're breastfeeding, suddenly you're feeding the whole family and you're cooking, and that's how it started with me. So they have good intentions, and then, I mean, study after study, they slide back into the 50s, into these hidebound traditional roles. You know, outside of the home, it's not the 50s, right? What's the percentage of women in the workplace now? It's 47%, I think, female, right? But then inside the home, you're like, what happened? Were my parents? You know, and that's what happened with me and with lots of other people. That was a long answer. I had to get it out.
So true.
Yeah.
Maria, what about you? Like in your work with couples, where do you see this breakdown?
So I think just the key word there was insidious, and the thing that I see is by the time that people come to me and they seek out therapy, they've gotten past the point of sort of working it out nicely or revisiting the topic in a way that they can both communicate without feeling that resentment, they're past the point of resentment. And the problem is that people do just sort of slip into these roles and they feel there's an accumulation of guilt, entitlement, a sense of kind of compensating for your partner's strengths or weaknesses or faults. And there isn't that kind of upkeep. So you can make, and I was telling you this, Alexis, before, that
Talk a little louder.
I was finding that you can make all the plans you want. You can put it on paper. You can write a list. You can be completely prepared. But if you don't revisit that list, and if you don't bring up the things that are happening as they're happening, and you wait until you get to a certain benchmark, or you wait until, okay, well, maybe when I go back to work, or maybe when I stop breastfeeding, we'll revisit it. It ends up just creeping up on you, and at that point there's so much anger and there's so much resentment that you're already dealing with the complexity of issues. And so I think the idea is to kind of make your feelings known as they're happening, sort of make it experiential. Nothing is going to work itself out. You're going to slip into these roles. It's going to be this insidious onset of, rupture unless you address it, unless you sort of focus on it and make it a thing, make it a part of your relationship.
But it's kind of hard too, because you're, in the beginning, especially with a baby, you're like just doing triage, right?
Right.
It's not really time for like, let's sit down, let's talk about how I'm doing all this stuff, you're doing all that stuff.
That's the hardest part, is giving yourself that time and feeling like there's a whole other part of you that still exists other than keeping the baby alive, other than the sort of the day-to-day. You still have needs. You still need to be seen. You need to be cared for. I mean, other than outside of America, there's so many cultures, and you read about this and you see about it all the time. They have practices in place for caring for the mom. And I think that we don't have enough advocacy, and so we have to kind of advocate for ourselves, even if it's with our partner in our marriage. And we expect them to see it, but they don't. You kind of have to make yourself seen and known and heard.
That was my number one problem that I had, is that I would glare at my husband. I would hate clean the dinner dishes, right? And I would glare at him, and I would think, he truly didn't. I still don't know what that's about, but he really wouldn't notice that I was cleaning the dinner dishes. And I would think, like, how can you not know? And I would just be coursing with resentment. But he didn't. I stopped. He didn't know because I didn't voice what was wrong. I had gone from 0 to 60 because of the resentment that you said sets in. But he can't read your mind. He can't read your mind.
Exactly.
So I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit, because I think that we as women, as mothers and caregivers, are our own worst enemy, quite frankly. We take on everything for a lot of reasons. Sometimes because we may not have a partner that like fills in the gaps, but oftentimes we do it because we want to do it, because we're going to do it the way we want to do it, right? Like, let's be honest, if we all of a sudden start to talk about all the things we want our partners to do, then we're inviting them to like make certain decisions that we may or may not want them to be making on a regular basis. So we sort of have to think about like the big picture. What is it really that we want? Like, where do we want help? Do we really want it here? Or do we really want a like simple appreciation, like, awesome, doing a great job, which by the way leads to great sex. Like a thank you gets you laid in really good ways. And that's important, to be appreciated. But I think there's something else, which is that we often, when we become mothers, so admittedly, I have an almost 14-year-old and an almost 10-year-old, so my kids are older and far more independent. But we do this thing where all of a sudden we are quite happy taking on the title of like everyone else's possessive noun, like so-and-so's mom, so-and-so's sister, so-and-so's spouse, so-and-so's this, right? And we forget that we have a name, right, beyond like mom or like hey you. And that's great, but until we remember that like we have a name and we're capable of having needs and intimacy and desires and ambitions beyond what we're doing, then no one knows unless it's important to us. And it's a wake-up call for us to think about like, who do I want to be, right? Like, is this my own role, only role, and am I comfortable being here, or is there something else? And how do I find a way to translate that? Because we are very quick to like do everything, and by the time a significant time has passed, like that
That's all we've become. You know, we don't give ourselves anything else.
There's also a reward for that. I feel like I've gotten so many compliments from people. Oh, well, you work and you take care of the kids and you take care of the house and you do it all, and that's amazing. And my husband gets none of that. He just gets a thumbs up for going to work and coming home.
Right, you exist. Congratulations.
Yeah, but there's like a societal, a cultural reinforcement of taking it all on and being so amazing for it. You know?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I always say, like, whether you work in the home or out of the home, in reality, I mean, I work a minimum of 3 full-time jobs in one day, right? Like, I manage my home, I manage my business, I manage my partnership, my family, like everyone's life, right? That's like a huge task to take on. Like, it's not just one job, it's 3 full-time careers. And we all do it all the time.
I think about the glass ceiling, right? That as women we're always striving to get to, and we're almost there. Like, we're climbing closer and closer to the glass ceiling. And yet, as we get there and we almost break it, nothing has shifted to make way for this power that we're starting to feel as women, this recognition, this equality, although we're not quite there, but we're getting closer. And so there's this expectation and pressure to be the 1960s housewife, mom, take care of it all, and also break the glass ceiling, right? Like, how do you do all of that all at once without history and society kind of catching up with you, right? So it's a beautiful place to be, and it triples the load of responsibility and work.
I think that's why we are so great at taking on all of that work. And I mean, because we have to prove that we're capable of doing it all. And the cool thing is that we actually are, like, we really are. But then everyone has their boiling point, you know, like there's only a certain amount of time that you can keep that going. And then you just become worn down because something has to give at a certain point. You know, so we're like at that ceiling where we're like the perfect housewife and the kick-ass person at work and the amazing mom. And you could do all of that. And then at a certain point, you're just like, holy shit, I'm going to have a breakdown by keeping this going. And that's when you ask for help. Or you just go into like a deep, dark depression, or you like overblow with rage.
But the reality is that, like, some things we can give up, right? Like, I mean, look, my sister is sitting here. I'm a mess. I can't cook to save my life. I am a disaster. And here's the deal, like, if the people in my life want certain things taken care of, guess what? You have to do them yourself. Because I am not, that's not my area. And sometimes that means taking stock of yourself, saying, like, this is what I love, this is what I'm really good at. You know what? There's certain things I'm not gonna do. I'm not gonna do it, and I'm gonna be okay if someone walks into my house. I mean, and I have those friends, women as well as men, who are like, Logan, you don't cook every night. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? No, Amy's organic mac and cheese, frozen, 4 minutes, my kids could live on it and be happy their whole lives. And you know what? Awesome. Okay, don't look. The reality is that I do plenty of other things that supplement all of that. I feel like the love and intimacy and affection and just being a good role model is great. I don't need to always give them a home-cooked meal. They'll figure it out, right? So, like, think about, like, get rid of this idea of being, like, perfect, because perfect is bullshit. It's never been perfect. No, definitely not.
You and I were talking about, you know, if you could give up some of this load, like if you could give up some of this work that you're doing, what would you give up? I know when, like, my therapist suggests to me, like, can you maybe imagine doing less? I start, like, having a twitch. Like, I'm like, oh my God, I don't have to do it all. For me, it's hard. I don't know. For you guys, I would love to throw it out there. Like, what do you think you could just give up easily, or have your partner do instead of you, and not feel like a loss of control?
Well, that's the key, right? You have to remember, like, be careful what you wish for.
Because it's called maternal gatekeeping, where you limit or control what the man does, what your partner does. And I did it all the time. I mean, has anyone been here where he tries to bathe the baby and you're like, you're gonna drown her, hold her on the head, she's slipping under, there's bubbles, help, you know. And then you're like, give her to me. Give her to me is the main thing I said to my husband over and over and over again. So this puts off a hesitant father, because in the beginning we're all amateurs, right? The more you do it, the more you put him off. And I was doing it all the time because, well, a lot of times I really did change diapers better than him. Now, there's not one particle of feces in those diapers that I operate afterwards. But, you know, I shut him out, and it was a pattern that I established right in the beginning and kept going. And then I reached the boiling point where he wasn't helping me. Well, that's because a lot of times I had shut him out, and it's maternal gatekeeping, and it's a thing.
Or what my partner used to call it was micromanaging.
Yes, there's another word, a more informal term.
Right.
Yes.
A term they understand. Right. So that's, I used, my thing when I was in my relationship, I'm a single mom now, but what I can recall from that time when we were together raising my son, the one thing I was okay with 100% giving up was putting him to bed. For him, it was like the easiest thing, and I just couldn't get it. I'm like, I can bathe him, and you can put him to bed. But that was a problem too. So that was one thing that I was able to give up, but I didn't always get the help in that. But yeah,
the thing you wanted was the thing you couldn't get.
Right.
I've heard a lot about this maternal gatekeeping, and we like don't want to give up control because, and the opposite response, like mom saying at the beginning is, oh, your husband says to you, you do it better. But I don't think I would be a maternal gatekeeping. I don't think I would do that if my husband actually put in, it's not just changing a diaper or giving a bath, it's doing it regularly and knowing how to do it and learning how to do it. So I think it's a bit of a cop-out. I don't know, and every time I read it, I have very mixed feelings about this maternal gatekeeping because I do think it's a cop-out. I think it's a way to put the burden back on women instead of saying, well, yes, let your husbands do it, but they should also be doing it well, and we should expect them to do it well.
I have a client here that has run up against this a few times, and she has 3 boys, 1, 5, and 7, and she runs up against this sensation frequently, right? It's that sensation of not only are you not doing it, but like, why do I have to ask you to do it? Like, why can't you just figure it out on your own? Like, why can't you look at this situation and be like, oh, that needs to happen? And so I've been treating her for some time, and she came in a few weeks ago and said, you know, it's happening again. Like, he's not being supported, he's not doing anything, he's not helping me. And she's like, here's a perfect example. She's a musician, she was out playing all night, she came home at midnight, her husband was watching the kids, he was in the kitchen making lunches, and when she came in at midnight, he immediately retreated to the sofa and started texting. And in a fit of rage, she went in and completed making the sandwiches and went to bed wanting to castrate him. And so I said, that's frustrating. That's so irritating. Oh, I can't imagine how upsetting that was for you. What would have happened if you came in, said goodnight, and went to bed? What would have happened? Right? Could you have broken the cycle? Like, would you have not saved him in that moment? Could you have let him sit with the fact that he had to make the lunches, right? It's just a different way of looking at it. I have been having feelings about my lovely husband that are rageful and resentful for many years, and I've also started to kind of look at this through a different lens. Like, I don't have to save you, right? Like, it's yours. I don't have to sweep in and make the sandwich. Good night. You make the sandwich.
I've got a comment on that though, but a lot of the sort of guilt comes back because this happened to me where you make lunches, you can figure it out, it's all there. And you know, my son went to school without a packed lunch, and when I came to pick him up, the teacher told me, oh, you know, Sully hasn't eaten today. I went back and offloaded on my husband, obviously, but I still feel guilty about that, you know, sort of 3 months later. And my husband was like, "Oh, sorry," you know. But it's so much better when you do it. But there's also one, you know, the teacher coming and finding me, you know, and I didn't say, "I didn't make the fucking packed lunch," you know. And two, the fact that I still carry that guilt. I mean, this is what we're talking about. The sort of culturally, it's so deep that even when you try and offload it and give up that control, you know, even all day I was thinking, is he giving him the pretzels he likes, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's still in my mental load, but then the sort of guilt that comes back when it does screw up, like, comes back to you. I think that's hard.
It's still there. Well, maybe it's a thing that there needs to be a little more thoughtfulness in choosing the thing that you're going to give up, right? Like, if you know that this is an important or meaningful act, like making lunch for your kids or putting them to bed. I think there's a lot of bonding that goes on with the bedtime routines. So to be more mindful about what it is that you're going to give up or what load you're going to choose to sort of share with your partner is important so that you know that you can tolerate that loss of control. I think it happens. I mean, it happens to me all the time. I sort of test my husband, and I do this for a living. I should know how to tolerate my loss of control and my emotions, but it's so personal that you don't, it sometimes the emotion just takes over. But you have to be mindful of what it is that you're going to choose. I don't cook dinner either, and I'm completely fine with that, but I get so much guilt for it. I mean, so much from, you know, from my mother and friends, same thing. But that, I don't have the same emotional connection to it as I would something like giving up bedtime.
You know, there's also something to be said for thinking about sort of who our parenting and relationship role models are and who our partners' role models are, like how they learned how to parent. And the likelihood is, in a lot of ways, you know, they are simply parroting what they know. They don't have another script for doing this. So sometimes it's about saying, you know, look, like let's think about how we take what we learned and get rid of all the things that we really didn't love, and find a way to do it our own way, to create our own parenting style. And like, who gives a fuck if it's not what anyone else does? If it, I don't, you know, I don't care if it doesn't work for anyone else. It has to work for us, right? And how do we create something that's ours, right? Where we all have our roles, but we're really okay with whatever those roles are. And if we need help, we're okay with asking for assistance too. Saying, you know what, like at this moment, I can't do this one thing. And where can we fill in for each other?
You guys have the Bringing Baby Home program, right, from the Gottmans? Is that here? Do you do that?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's really great.
Yeah.
And there's one exercise that the Gottmans have new parents do, and it's name 5 ways that you were parented when you were a kid that you like and want to continue, and 5 ways that you were parented that you are not going to continue. And it's a really useful exercise because it really clarifies in 2 seconds what your values are that you may not even know that you have. You know, sometimes you're not even kind of clear on it, or maybe like religion becomes more important when you have the baby. All of a sudden you're religious, you know, or, and then
You don't even realize you're doing it.
yeah. And it just sort of bubbles up. So that really helped tremendously. We did it later, but you know.
Well, I'm
then.
single, so that's some good advice. Next time. Darla, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, one of the things I find challenging, and I wonder if you guys can kind of talk about it, is that I get a lot like, well, it was fine before you got here, right? Like I had it all under control. And the idea of like, right, when you travel for work or when you're doing something, like they do have it covered, right? You know they're capable of it. That's also like why we chose them, right? Like somewhere deep down, like, right, we believe in them. And I wonder if you have any sort of like comments or suggestions on the like, well, they act differently when you're here, and they, you know, and right, because then you come in and they're in their groove. Either you're on a trip for multiple days, or you come in from this lovely event as an example. I'm going to bomb on in the door, right? And like, hopefully they'll be asleep, but they probably won't be. And then it'll be like, Brad, Mom, you know, like, and it was like, well, they were fine before you came home, Beryl. And it's like, sorry, dude, like, I won't come home, like, I don't know what you know, like, trust me, I tried to miss bedtime, you know, so I think, and I don't feel bad about it, because I won't do it 2 nights in a row, so, like, that's really, again, picking your limits. So I think I'd love to understand, like, just some thoughts around that, right, because, again, you know they can do it, right, they do it when you go away for 3 nights in a row, or whatever it may be, and the idea of, like, so they're capable, how do you then kind of shift a little bit of that responsibility?
So what I would say is that it depends on what the dynamic is between the two of you, right? What is it that's happening between you and your husband or your partner when you walk in the door and he says, we were fine before you got here? What's triggering him, right? Is he intimidated by you? Is he, are the kids, you know, do they know that they gravitate towards mom when she comes in the door? Or what is it that happens in that moment, that interaction between the two of you that makes, that creates that shift? And I think it's so hard to answer that in a general way because everybody's got a pattern. Everybody's stuck in this like fixed way of interacting with their significant other unless they make it sort of explicit what it is that's going on. So, you know, many things could be at play there. He might feel like he's lost control, he's lost power, he has to share power, he has to share control or authority. He knows that the kids gravitate towards you. I think it depends very much on what it is that goes on between the two of you and how the division of responsibilities actually, you know, falls the majority of the time. Do you have a sense of like what it is in your case?
Oh goodness, I won't drag everyone through all of that, but I mean, I'm sure it's a little bit of all of the above. Everything's a little bit of all of the above.
Kids also have an interesting way of knowing, you know, who it is that they could run to and prolong bedtime, and who they can mess with and who they can manipulate, and who's easily manipulated and who's more rigid.
I just think it's interesting when you think about the mental load. It's like, you know, like, yeah. Right, it's like, you know, at least in this particular example, right, like, and maybe some people don't feel this way, but like, you know, when push comes to shove, they can handle it, and right, like, and you know, how do you sort of now, it's like, well, you know, again, I think it's just a matter of where that line is.
I think they're also like playing into this myth of not being able to handle it once you come in. Right. You know, it's like, well, I was okay by myself, but then you came and you ruined it, which is, it's sort of a dynamic, it's a cliche thing, right? It's like, I was good, but then you came and like, then everything went to hell. I had it handled, but then you came. And I feel like those are things that like people say, but it's not actually true. It's like, what did you do right before I came that like messed this whole thing up?
But it's also about just acknowledging when someone says, you know, I had it all together before you walked in the door. You're like, you absolutely did. I recognize that, like, I walked in and it became a shit show.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
You're totally right. And you know what? Like, now we'll figure out like where we are right now, because clearly in this like moment, chaos has now ensued, and we got to figure out how to like get them to where they need to go next.
I think children are just being children at the moment. They're like really excited to see the other parent walking through the door. Right. And I struggle with that sometimes when I feel like there's order and all of a sudden there's chaos with that change. So my husband and I, we've had quite a lot of discussion centered around that, and like taking a moment to realize that it's not us. Like, she's close to being 3 and totally has this huge personality, and it's just her. So instead of like focusing that energy back onto ourselves, just trying to realize like, this is kind of natural, and we just take a deep breath and just try to roll with it. Because in a few minutes, that calmness, like when she sees it in the two of us, usually we fail at it miserably, but there are times since we've had numerous conversations around this where we are like, what's happening? Let's like be the calm parents, let her have her energy, and she'll like calm back down on her own when she sees where we are.
Yes, and I remember so frequently on those rare moments where I went out or I had to work something or social something, and I was coming home and the kids were going to be in bed, and I'm like, this is going to be so great. I'm going to walk in, they're going to be sleeping, and I'm going to go straight to bed. And it's this fantasy that I constructed in my head, and then I would open the door and it was like, and like dogs vomiting on the floor, and I was like, why did you do this so wrong? And I realized the sword I fell upon was the fantasy, right? Like I allowed myself to think I was going to walk into this beautiful moment, but I never entertained, what if you don't walk into this beautiful moment? Like, what if you walk into a moment that's really actually not so perfect? Like, what if one kid's awake and one kid's asleep and this stuff is happening? And when I walked in with the fantasy, my immediate reaction was, right? Like it's opening ourselves up to a whole array of options, right? And as much as we want to wed ourselves to the perfect one, what if it's not that one? What if it's kind of that one? What if it's not so much that one? What if it's the opposite of that one? And I've learned, and I don't know how helpful this is, but I learned to be like, okay, I'm coming home. What's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? What's the most likely scenario? And I covered all my options, right? So when I walk in, I'm like, okay, well, it could be this, that, or that. But sometimes there's this fantasy that we carry.
What about how parents, the interplay of parents when you walk in and one has been, and sometimes in my case, it's my husband that's watching the kids or I'm watching the kids, and we come back and things are a disaster.
Yeah.
And it's the dog, peed all over the floor, and the kids nobody's asleep, and everything's a mess. The dishes are all over the place. They're toys strewn. And we want to carve out time for ourselves, whether it was an amazing day or a crappy one. What do you do at that point? How do you come out of that and get all four, or however many people in your family, on the same page?
Besides flipping out.
Besides somebody pointing a finger, blaming the dog, blaming the kid, blaming the leak, whatever it is.
I really manage things. You know what I learned? This is just me, but for me, the rage-ometer is lower if, like, it's part of the mental load where I still have to manage things. Like, after I leave here, I'm going to text my husband and say, I'm home at 9, can you please make the place nice and clean? Like, and that's my way of staying on my own side, because it's either that, or if I were to go home and it's chaos and bedlam, which it would be normally, it's worse for me. My cortisol levels will shoot way up. Whereas if it's irritating to text them and say, I'm on my way, because it's like if they start, then at least you're on your side. At least you're working towards not making yourself bonkers, Whereas if you hope for the best and go home and it's chaos, so I rather do that. And yes, it's irritating, and you're still being a household manager, which is annoying. But that's where I'm at right now.
No, but that's where I'm at right now. I do that, and I wouldn't want to tell him to clean.
Well, so I think maybe it's sorry.
No, I do that. I like pre-game it.
You have to and like you say, like, oh, I would like it if you told me. Does he ever have to tell you to clean up? No, because you just do it.
Exactly.
Right? That's the thing. You just do it. You don't have to be told.
No,
but
dude,
I hate to say, I don't want to make this like a rally.
I'll leave here and I'll be like, I'm coming home. I'll enter the apartment building and I'll be like, I'm coming upstairs.
Yes. I'm in the elevator. Right.
Well, I have to say, I think you're starting to get on like the least rigid human being on the face of the earth, like maybe laid back to a fault. But I sort of feel like, first of all, if things aren't exactly as they're supposed to be, like what's the worst thing?
But that isn't perfection. It's just like not chaos and bedlam.
But here's the thing. But I always assume they're kids. It's an unknown. They're human beings. Like, there's always going to be some element of like chaos, right? Mm-hmm. They don't know how to operate with order. They're like little human beings with like a lot of emotion. So I always assume there's going to be something. It's just a matter of like, what is it going to be today? I have no idea. But I think that one of the ways to deal with, like, instead of the sort of like, I need you to do this, I think it's a matter of, it's not about like who's putting away the dishes all the time. It's that there are other things that I want to have like intimate personal conversations with you, and this stuff like distracts from it. So I think sometimes it's a matter of just texting or calling and saying, look, there's something I really want to talk to you about when we get home. Like, can we find a way to set aside a few minutes, even if it's when we're like sitting in bed, like, as opposed to both of us like turning on the TV or shutting off the light. Like, there's some things I want to share with you today, right? Because then, like, you'll find a way to get the other stuff done, because there's something more important, which is this connection, right? But we always make it about the other stuff instead of the like, I need a few minutes just to like download with you.
Going off of that sharing aspect, my baby's 6 months old, so we're still sort of in the like very new navigating like phase. But I feel like to that point, like, we're still figuring out like, okay, who gets to go to the gym first on Saturday, or who gets to like hang out with friends, and like who gets to stay home and I say babysit, but like who's staying with the baby. So we're like taking shifts almost during like weekend hours, and so we're like passing like, okay, it's my turn this weekend to go out and like have 4 hours by myself, and then I'll come home and take over, and my husband will go out, and then we're like married happily, but like co-parenting like separately. We're not really doing it together, like at the same time, because it's exhausting. It's like we recognize that we both need breaks, but it's how do you take breaks and do things for yourself and enjoy time, the three of you or four of you, however many, like figuring that out is difficult. And just like we sharing it all.
It certainly can. And also I think that there's you know, I remember one of my most fun nights as a new parent was friends of ours, I think our son was 5 months, 6 months old, and our friends called us and said, we have a reservation for dinner at 10 o'clock. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it, we're in. And we took the baby, passed out asleep in that carrier thing, stuck it, I flipped over the stool. We were at the Tribeca Grill, I remember. Flipped it over, stuck him in there. He slept the whole time. 10 p.m. I'm like, this is great. Like, we felt like human beings. We had this little person next to us. Like, so it's a matter of sort of like doing it in non-traditional ways. And also it's about making the moments when they're asleep count. Right? Like a little connection goes a really long way.
Jancee, you talked about this a lot in your book, about how you like never made time for each other, ever. Because you brought your kid everywhere with you.
We did. Oh, yeah. I only have one, and so we just were this unit of three. and you know, I realized what also helped me is when I never took time for myself on the weekend. I mean, I was a bit of a martyr, and it's this thing, time contamination, where if you have half an hour, instead of going to get a coffee and sit in the park, you go and buy sports socks, right? Or like, you gotta be useful, you know, and I would constantly do that time contamination. Like, you just can't relax and do something for yourself, right? But then when my daughter started getting older, she's 9 now, I realized that I was doing this behavioral modeling thing where I was teaching her by my actions rather than my words that my time was not valuable, that my leisure time on the weekends was not valuable, that I wasn't deserving of recharging. And by leisure time, I mean like going to the gym for an hour, nothing crazy, you know. And instead of going to Target or Trader Joe's, right, like for everybody else. Although Target can be a party. Yeah, anything can be a party when you're alone. So I realized that like she was seeing me. You know, you can give the girls rule speeches all you want, but if your actions are saying, you know, I'm home all weekend doing nothing, I'll just make sandwiches for you guys. That's what she is absorbing, you know. So I use that as a way, like, to use my. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep blabbering. And then please blab. You know, it's kind of sad is that I was, at least at first when I started trying to improve things around our house, is I would think about how I was looking through my daughter's eyes, and it's kind of sad to me now because I wasn't thinking about how my marriage was crumbling. It was more about, you know, and he was doing the same thing. Like I would say, Tom, if you think she isn't picking up on the fact that, like, he took up long distance cycling right when the baby shot out, and he literally pedaled away, and then, you know, right? And so, but then I would say to him, like, if you don't think that she's absorbing, that you're on the couch playing, this is another thing, he took up social chess. He's always doing computer chess with some guy from the Philippines. And I said, if you think she's not seeing what you're doing and formulating, I mean, there's tons of research about this. You know, right? Like, later on in life, this is what they expect from their mate. So if you're a schlump on the couch, that's who they're gonna end up with someday, you know. And that he did not like that. That scared him.
So just, I wanted to respond to some of the stuff about spending time as a couple. We also had a very bleak year after my daughter was born, because basically I was doing most of the housework. I think it was an unforced error by me. We were married for 9 years, and I realized afterwards that I was doing basically everything. And then I was trying to get my husband to help with the kid, but he was the youngest and I was an oldest, and so the dynamic was a mess. But I mean, this is probably a lot of people's experience, but as it relates to time for each other, my husband and I had a very serious conversation about empathy, his lack of empathy for me and my load that I was carrying. And what he said to me, I was so struck by. He said that he didn't feel like he could talk to me openly about the things that he was dealing with, because I was always dealing with so much. And so our response to that, which has actually been helping a lot, is to set aside what we call, I mean, you could call it anything or nothing, but we call it the sacred hour, which is from 8:30 to 9:30 on a Sunday night when the baby's asleep. We actually have 1 hour set aside where we could talk about anything. Sometimes it's literally the schedule for the week, like what's happening, but other times it's like some really serious and difficult topics, and it's in a non-confrontational way, and it's helped to and Jancee's book basically saved me also, but it's helped to a lot to open up the conversation. Our workload situation is still not great, but at least I know that I have a space in that hour that if things are getting really out of control, or even if they're not, but if things are not that great, I can actually bring it up then. So to the mom over here who was talking about the 6-month baby, and you and your husband, we also did the shifts, and we basically lived past each other for a long time. And I think only now, like it was about maybe 20 months in, which is too late in my opinion to some extent, we decided to set aside that hour, and it's made a huge difference.
I think that is so important. And as a parent of a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old who wanted to massacre my husband like the first 3 or 4 years, if not longer, we didn't have that, right? And we've done a lot of work in our relationship to get to where we are, and this weird thing happens, and I know this is hard for those of you who have younger children, and I was you once, and if someone said this to me, I'd be like, like, you get to this place, right, where your kids become more and more independent. They naturally creep away from you, right? And after all of this, like, turmoil and chaos and resentment and rage, and then it dissipates, and then you find yourself in a position where you're like, hi. The kids are both gone tonight. What are we going to talk about? What do we agree upon? What are our connections, right? As hard as it is to imagine that you're going to get to that place, everybody is. And so in the ways that you can keep that vein connected, and maybe it's not every night, but it's like 2 nights a week where you have that sacred time set aside, because your family's going to grow, your kids are going to grow, they're going to get more independent, they're going to become freer and freer, and then you're going to be looking at your husband, the guy that you were like, you didn't do anything right, and you're a pair again, you're a couple again. And so anything that you can find to keep that, even if it's like you touch pinkies in the morning. Okay. Even if that's it does happen, and you do find yourself in that place.
But
so
yeah. I mean, not to like be the sexologist on the panel, but I will say that, you know, a little bit of sexual intimacy, and it does, like, I get it, it hurts, especially after, like, my doctor was like, listen, Logan, if you want to tell Lou, I said, no, you can't, no problem, and I was like, well, maybe, I don't know, but a little, you know, a little bit of intimacy and pleasurable intimacy where both people are fulfilled in some way goes a long way, right? Because I think what happens is we do so much talking at and so little, like, not just emotionally connecting, but physically connecting, that we forget, like, why we loved each other and chose to partner with each other in the first place. And, you know, when you are as vulnerable as you can be, it becomes a lot easier to talk through all of these things, right? Because everyone is in a place where they're willing to hear it. And look, I'm not, you know, makeup sex works when there is not like total rage and resentment, right? Like there's a point where like no amount of sex is going to help, quite honestly. But like, the little things, sometimes it's a matter of both partners sort of being frustrated that they've lost all this couple identity and they've become everything to everyone else. And a little bit of connection, even the pinky thing, right? Like feeling like we touch, there's an intimacy, right? Like if your partner like drapes their leg over you when they're sleeping, like there is something there that makes you feel like, oh right, we're a unit. Right. And a little goes a long way.
Can I ask you something, Logan?
Yeah, sure.
When I first had the baby and he would make a move.
Yeah.
You know the old like the you know when you're sleeping and he does the stick him up in the back?
Yeah.
That thing?
Like I feel you.
Yeah. But I felt like I was touched out after being with the baby all day.
Yeah.
You discuss that and you're like, it's such a physical, tactile thing to have a baby.
Yeah. And here's the thing, that it's one of the things that, I mean, I'm going to make an assumption that a partner is a person with a penis in this case, but the thing about people with penises is that they are not touched at all during the day. I wrote this book called How to Get Your Wife to Have Sex with You, which my husband like insisted on reading before it was published because he said that he was going to call everyone and say that I was a liar. So, you know, one of the things that it started to become really evident was that as a woman, right, whether it's your kids, whether it's friends, whether it's even at work, like everyone is constantly on you, like everything, like grabbing you. And so when your partner comes home, even if it's the person like you love and adore, when they go to touch you, your body doesn't register it as like, oh, this is the person I love and want to be intimate with. It's like, oh my God, get your fucking hands. Like you're just another someone who wants something out of me. And I think the problem is, right, that they don't see it like that because no one touches them all day long and all they want is a connection. And here we are coming at it from two very different perspectives. And sometimes it's a matter of saying, you know what, like when I turn away from you, I want you to understand, like, it's not about you. This is my experience. Tell me your experience of like, we can find this middle ground because they don't get it at all.
The men I work with in therapy, they cannot possibly understand how their wives don't need it in the same way that they need it. And I think that is such a disconnect. I think that there's this sort of overall kind of pathologizing of dependence and neediness, whether on an intimate level or on an emotional level, on a practical level. And the men just can't figure out how is it that women don't need the same sense of closeness and intimacy that I do. And I wonder if there's, you know, so much of it is societal, cultural. We don't feel like we're entitled to ask for that or have that particular need. We talked about other needs in here, needing practical help, needing things to be like the way we want them when we come home, but I feel like women get so bogged down in the day-to-day that we don't feel like we can ask for that particular need or ask for it in the way that we want it or to how to be approached. But men are sort of in the dark, right? They don't really understand how women sort of ask for those kinds of things.
I don't know if it's so much that they're in the dark, but I think that for men, they experience a connectedness and a closeness through physical intimacy, whereas women experience it through a lot of emotional stuff and being recognized and talking and, you know, the looking at each other. And, you know, if you're not feeling valued, if you're not feeling cared for as a partner, it can, you know, really make you not want to be intimate.
For sure. But if
they don't realize that they're not fulfilling those needs, right? They don't always know that they're not making their partners feel valued or seen and heard. I think that's what we're sort of at the core of what we're talking about.
There's definitely that, but also I think that if we weren't groped by everyone all day long, like you would be much more like ready to receive an intimate touch if it wasn't like the 7,000th grope of the day.
Right. I remember at some point in my children being of toddler age, my husband sending me this email about love languages. And he was like, I really think you should read about love languages. It would be really important for you. And I was like, when you're coming up, I don't have time to read about love languages. And I didn't really come to appreciate it until more recently. And I use this a lot at the Motherhood Center of like, everybody experiences love and gives love differently, right? And it's not a one size fits all. Like, you know, having sex and being super intimate is one person's description of love. And then when we're looking at love languages, somebody might experience love by getting a gift, which I experience, and I want to tell my husband, I always remember when I tell this story, I need to go home and say, I experienced love by getting a gift. Do you remember that? There's intimacy, there's gift giving, there's communication. Like, these are all different ways to give and receive love. But we can't expect our partner to know that that's how we experience love unless we let them know. And so as much as I thought when my husband said, oh, do this test, I was like, that's so stupid. Like, now that I look back in retrospect, it's a really clarifying exercise to do together as a partnership. And like, you know, you answer questions and your husband's like, well, this is my love language. And you're like, this is my love language. And this is how we know that you're giving and receiving love and I'm giving and receiving love. And it's okay for it to look differently. And there's something about like a structured practice where like this thing exists, like there's a love language test you can take, let's do it, versus I really like to get gifts. Like sometimes it's easier to leave it on a structured exercise versus having a conversation. So
Sounds like a Cosmo sex. Taking a Cosmo sex.
I like that. I think a lot of you have two things. I think a lot of you have touched on sort of that. Do what works for you. That it can look different for everyone. I think part of this is actually we sort of think of coming from this really in the past historically patriarchal society and being raised the way we were raised, but like. I think we also have to look at the other side of like, I'm assuming we're New Yorkers, progressive, egalitarian. There's also like something that comes with that. Like, shouldn't it be 50-50? And in my own household, so I love to cook. That is what calms me down. That is an anxiety reliever for me. I never want my husband to cook. He has no clue how to cook. Wouldn't even know where to begin. He is so hopeless in the kitchen. When I tell people that, they automatically assume, like I've had people make snide comments about how gendered that is. My husband, who is super close with his dad, grew up in a house where his dad did the cooking. My husband's brother, my brother-in-law, is a great cook. It's not a gender thing. I love to cook, and that is my zone. My husband has no clue what to do in the kitchen. He works really well for us, but sort of my fellow progressive egalitarians, like it is this like, oh, that's like terrible. Like, and he has said before, if you ever want me to learn, I'll do that. God, please, it's not perfect. We have plenty of issues, but that's not what I want. And then separately, like, Jancee, thank you for bringing up the behavioral modeling, because aside from wanting to make my own life easier, like I have such anxiety about the fact that I have this son. He's only 16 months, but like from the day I found out I was having a boy, and I cried tears of joy in the same way I would have cried tears of joy if I found out I was having a girl, but then I had this anxiety because I felt like if I had a girl, I know what to tell her. I'm going to tell her, like, no, equality now, and be a strong woman, da-da-da. And I'm like, oh my God, how do I raise a boy to not be like this entitled little ass? Like, how do I do that? And like, my husband's pretty great, but we were children of the 80s who were raised in a certain way. Like, what do I do to make sure the next generation is just a little bit better? That like when my son marries her daughter, like like I need to know that he's going to be an even better husband than mine.
Empathy. You teach him empathy. I think empathy is at the core of human connection, of partnership, of modeling for any gender. Any person that you're going to raise to be able to be a good partner to someone, they need to empathize and really learn how to feel and kind of understand what it is that's being asked of them in a relationship.
You also teach them about tampons. No, I'm dead serious. I mean, like,
empathically.
I say it jokingly and seriously, but I mean, some of that comes from, if we have uteruses, it's our obligation really to teach our sons about what it means biologically to be a female, that this is something that's amazing and it's not something to be afraid of or ashamed of, and we shouldn't like freak out when your partner says, could you please go to the drugstore and buy tampons, right? But and it seems sort of silly and superficial on one level, but it's really about like understanding that we're really not so different, but they're, you know, it's what the Gillette ad was all about, right? I mean, it's that masculinity on its own isn't toxic. We do things to it to corrupt it, but you know, empathy and understanding and modeling for our kids, sort of like that families look very different, but respect is always at its core, right? And when you teach your kids that, they really do understand that the default setting for our kids, boys in particular, is not predator, right? I've spent like my life writing about this in the sex ed space. Like the default setting for boys is not predator. Like that's on us as parents and caregivers. We do that. They don't do that.
So with that, because I find myself in a unique space where I'm raising my son, he's 9 years old, and to that whole Me Too movement, right? You know, we're all from New York. You walk down the block, you have a man hooting or hollering at you or looking at you. I don't know if you guys seen that YouTube video with that woman that worked throughout the whole boroughs with a book bag. And so with that, I've kind of felt like being more comfortable naked in front of my son, but you know, not in an inappropriate way, but like just so that he can get more comfortable with seeing ass and boobs and like whatever that may be, just because I don't want him to feel like, you know, and learning how to say no. Like if I tell him, I'm sorry, but I don't want to hug right now, like, you know, just respect my space and things like that. And so with that, I mean, you know, I try to keep it PG, but, you know.
Yeah, so first of all, I think that's amazing. I mean, look, you know, I struggle with the word inappropriate. It's bullshit. There's no such thing as inappropriate. We live in a world where there are a million people telling us a million ways we're going to screw up our kids, and it paralyzes us, right? There are kids absolutely capable of hearing sophisticated information, and there are adults who can't, right? It's not about age, it's about like an individual. And so there are families, right, whether it's single families or step families or blended or married, that are totally comfortable with nudity in bodies, and there's some that aren't, right? And that's okay. You are whoever you are. The whole idea behind it is that we just don't want to like deposit our shame about our bodies if we have it to someone else, right? But it is completely acceptable. My sister will tell you my children wouldn't get fed if I was dressed in the morning. It's just the way it is. I'm sorry, like they don't get that. I mean, so inevitably, like I'm like half dressed or semi-dressed. And you know what? Your kids will let you know, like, when they want privacy and if and when they want you to have some privacy. And by the way, it's a great way to teach them respect to knock upon a door. Like, if you don't want to see me, then you see the door that's closed. Guess what you do? Don't walk in. Right? So that you're totally fine.
There's forever nudes and never nudes. Right?
Sorry. Can't we also take some of that, like if we're talking about degendering a little how we raise the next generation, does in some of that lie some of the answers to the bigger question that we're asking today about the mental load of motherhood? Because we talked a lot about, you know, in general terms, the women do this and the men do this, or the women need to send a text saying, you know, it's time to tidy up. Like personally in my relationship, my husband is the tidy one, and like I'm on enforced Marie Kondo duty right now to make that. But I do think that like if we take a step back and acknowledge all of that, but then also just think about like this is a partnership between two people who are trying to achieve a project, right? Like these are two people who are coming together to try and create something bigger than them, and they'll have strengths and weaknesses and they'll work together in different ways. If we take gender out of it for a moment, does that actually give us a bit more freedom to deal with some of these problems? And if so, then when you're not dealing with the super gendered constructs, how do these lessons that you're talking about apply? Whether that's in a same-sex family, whether that's in a family that, you know, where it isn't the slob and the, you know, amazing organizer, or where those roles are reversed. Like, what advice do you have for families that fall outside of those traditional norms?
That's such a good point. It's such a good question. I've been looking at the research. It's still emerging with same-sex couples. And they're really killing it on the parenting front. They're doing great. And it's because they are not hampered by this crap. And they divvy up chores. There's been a couple of studies about this where they divvy up chores according to preference. That's a concept, and I thought, wait, why weren't we doing that? Like, you know, you really realize how much we're falling into these behaviors and not even analyzing them. And I was thinking, oh, I should, what was it that he was doing? Oh, my husband actually likes to do the laundry, and I never knew this, and I loathe doing the laundry. And so we started from scratch, and we started just saying, well, what do you like to do better? I love grocery shopping. I think it's really fun. I don't know why. He can't stand it. He doesn't like fluorescent lighting. He tells me it's a weird thing. And so we started from scratch, and we did it according to preference. Now, no one likes to unload the dishwasher, and there's been research. I keep bringing up research every 5 minutes, but I just find it so interesting. The dishwasher, there is so much rage around the dishwasher. And it's because it is, right, like it's so boring, it's continual, it's dirty. You don't get like a pile of clean laundry.
It's the transition from the sink.
Is that what it is? Yes.
Or the lack of transition.
That's the path of rage. It's the path of rage. I don't transition. I leave it in the sink.
Me too.
You do?
Yeah. And the pot,
I can't. I need closure.
Really?
I need to move it. Clear.
I just wanted to offer a different perspective that I feel a little weird saying, but it's not safe for mom group, so I can. My husband does a lot more of the housework. He told me.
Me too.
He told me that I was not good at doing dishes like 10 years ago, and I said, guess what? I'm never doing a dish again. And I have never done a dish again, like literally, unless he's out of town. And I was thinking of this, of what you choose not to do, but I was working full time. My son went to his first days of twos, and I did not lay out the clothes, and I went to pick him up, and he was wearing, literally, pajama top and bathing suit bottoms. And I laughed hysterically and took a picture. But that's sort of how our dynamic is, and really he does so much. He likes grocery shopping, and we both work full time. And I'm not trying to say, as we were saying in the beginning, that dad that has a baby Bjorn and does mac and cheese, I wanted to kill him a million times when my baby, he started a side project business when I was pregnant, so he was working 2 full-time jobs, and I did want to murder him. But in the length, my oldest is 5.5 and my youngest is 2, but in the length of our marriage, he does so much.
How was he raised? Where'd that come from?
Right. I don't know. I don't know. And I think a lot of it, but I don't think it's because how he was raised. I think a lot of it came from 2 things. One, conversations and fights between us, that we're laying down the laws. And second, that I think I'm just I'm not doing that. So it will get done. I'm not doing another dish. But I'm not taking credit for that. But I think
that's how you've delineated the rules.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it.
Do you ever feel that in reverse?
I don't really think he does. I don't, because I do a lot. I make all the doctor's appointments. I do the haircuts. I do the clothes. I think there's a lot of things that I do that I do all our in-law relationships.
By the way,
which is a big mental load. But a lot of these traditional things that we're talking about, he just doesn't.
Thank you for saying that, because I feel the same way. But one thing that we haven't talked about that I wanted to say was the exhaustion. I have a almost 2-year-old daughter, and so we both work full time. My husband owns a business, and I have a day job, and I'm just so tired. And when you go, I want to go back to your partnership, and sometimes it's just having the mental energy. And you say it gets better. The kids, they get older, and I'm so tired.
Well, that's the thing that oftentimes another person might not understand the same way. That to them, it feels like it's a rejection of them, but it's not, right? It's that they don't live in your experience. And sometimes that conversation goes a long way. I love you and I want to be with you, and this is what my experience is, and tell me what yours is, because the problem is after a while, we turn away, and then it becomes something bigger, right? But it's oftentimes we're not speaking the same language, love language or otherwise. It's just that our experiences are so very different, and I think that being able to say I would what would and sometimes it's a matter of thinking to yourself, like, what would make this like an ideal intimate moment? Like, what do we need? Okay, what do we need like in a perfect world? And like, what are some things I could give up and still like be really into it?
Right. So because like, well, I like what you had to say about the sacred hour, but because I feel like he's not complaining or anything, that but still I feel before we had a baby, it was different, as for everybody, but just like I'm so tired. I feel like I can't give my energy to. I still want to, but I just can't. Like maybe it's just like the season of life we're in. But
I think also, and so I'm going to use the M word, which you're going to like, everyone's going to roll their eyes at, but like, this is where masturbation is really important. And I say that seriously because I think that sometimes after a while, when we haven't been intimate, we forget what it feels like to feel that kind of pleasure for ourselves. Right. And then once we have it, we're like, oh, right. Like, why has this been so long? And by the way, it doesn't matter if it's first by yourself, but it's an important reminder that you are a sexual being. You are someone deserving of physical pleasure, not just emotional pleasure. And that like, oh right, that part of my life is important too, because it's really easy to forget. And the longer you push, right, the less important it becomes. And what it does is it creates this divide in your partnership, right, if you're a partner.
And I just want to add, when your kids get older, it doesn't get easier, it gets different. There's always a challenge. And when we talk about the mental load of motherhood, whereas when you have an infant, it's diaper changing, it's breastfeeding, it's waking up every 2 or 3 hours, it's, the doctor's appointment, all this stuff. I find myself in a position now where my children are going through what it's like to turn into a person and experience bullying and having, a breakup or somebody that you have a crush on break your heart, like, right? And somehow this is coming to me and I love it and I'll take it and I'll hold it forever. And it's a load, like it's exhausting and I wouldn't want it any other way, but it is what it is, right? So I don't know that I would ever say it gets easier, it gets different. And then what I also want to say, and I encourage moms here at the Motherhood Center to embrace this concept, which is the word surrender. And when we think about the word surrender, oftentimes we think of like fighting a war and you're surrendering, you're giving in, you're giving up, you're waving a white flag, I've failed. I use the word surrender as giving in, not giving up, giving in, right? Like to surrender to a situation that transpires between you and your partner, right? Like, I'll give an example. My lovely partner, Catherine, has seen my house, and much to her dismay and mine too, I've always been like a super anal, immaculate person where everything has to go where it goes, and it has to belong here, and there has to be no dust, and that's how I've lived my life. And after raising a slob of a daughter and a son and a husband who gets home from work and drops his pants, underpants, and socks on the living room floor, like so many arguments have transpired. I'm like, you are disgusting. Like, who does that? Like, and I still have this conversation. Who does that? Like, who comes home and decides the living room rug, drop your underpants? But I'm also kind of like, have at it, people. You want to have your socks and your dirty underpants and your shit all over the floor, have at it. I'm not going to clear it up for you. And you see what that's like for you. You live with that for a while. Sadly, they're okay with it. I have this one little place in my house, in my bedroom. It's the top of my dresser, and it is my sacred place. And I have my dad's ashes there. I have my passport from when I was little. I have all these little things that live on this top of my dresser, and it's mine. It is in my 975 square foot apartment, which is strewn with dog and child and dirty man's underpants. This is mine. Don't even look at it. Don't even walk by it. It is mine. You'll never touch it, right? So carving out these spaces for ourselves that are ours, and our family understands that they're ours, and surrendering to some of the other parts of it, which might feel hard. Sometimes it's what we have to do. And I'm not encouraging you to embrace or endorse your husband's dirty underpants, but like, we do have to entertain and give it.
We don't have a ton of time left, but I didn't want to leave without addressing just some fight tactics. When you're having like an impasse or you just can't even communicate, you have no idea how to get through to this person that you're partnered with forever on some level because you have a little person in your lives. And Jancee had this part in her book where she was talking about you talked to FBI agents.
I did.
And you gleaned some information about their negotiating tactics, and we can apply it to our partners.
I mean, a lot of it is, we were talking about this earlier, but a lot of it is psychology 101, right? But
it works.
But it works. I was at the gym. I was like half-heartedly doing the elliptical. This is how I work out now. It's like, nah. And I saw on the TV that there was a hostage crisis at a Texas bank. And within 3 minutes, the FBI had come in, the crisis negotiation unit, and they had subdued this guy who was waving a gun around. And I thought, because I'm the one in the relationship, our dynamic is I yelled. I don't anymore, but I did. And he was calm and he would retreat or retract into himself like this. And he would stonewall me and I would yell more loudly. So I thought, okay, well maybe the FBI can help us. So I called the head of the FBI crisis negotiation unit for 30 years. He's put down prison riots. He's done, he's negotiated with hostage takers and all kinds of different things, kidnappings. And I said, do you have techniques? How did you all do that? Like, could that work in a relationship? And he said, yeah, sure. His name's Gary. He's a friend of mine now. So Gary and I met, and he told me that there's 7 active listening techniques taught by the FBI. Again, they're taken from psychology, but everyone's trained in them. And the key is the word active listening. Listening is not a passive exercise, right? It's not. And if people just want to be heard. I interviewed so many different people for this book, and neuroscientists, couples counselors, FBI guys, and everyone, they all told me the same thing. People want to be heard. And I think what I'm hearing, and my frustration was too, is I felt like my husband wasn't hearing me. And so he said, okay, what you do is, one is paraphrasing, very simple, but just so that you convey that you've heard, just state the person's case in your own words. So if my husband and I were fighting, Gary trained Tom, my husband, to say, okay, so what you're saying is you're mad that you don't know the name of our child's pediatrician. Right? That's what you're saying. And I would say, yes, it's Dr. Gordon. Yes, you don't know the name of our child's pediatrician. And just, he was hearing me, and even if his attempts to restate what I was saying were clumsy or completely off the mark, sometimes we would laugh because I would be like, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. You're not hearing me. But even that would break the tension. And then there's mirroring. That's where if you're kind of ranting about something, the other person just repeats the last couple of words. So if you've gone through a rant and you say, and I'm pissed, the other person says, and you're pissed. and you're kind of like a little part of you breaks inside because you're like, oh wait, maybe he is paying attention. Another is offering, this is for highly agitated individuals, as Gary told me. He's like, in law enforcement, people say, oh, fuck you cops, you goddamn cops, I want to kill you. And he would say, so what I'm hearing is you want to kill us. And the guy would say, yeah. And he would calm down a little bit. So you should clarify your scattered thoughts. Anyway, another is offering minimal encouragements. I catch my husband doing this to me all the time, but it does help. If I'm talking about something, if I'm saying like, look, Tom, you have to take, our daughter's name is Sylvie, you have to take her this, to the park just so I can get a little work done. He'll say, yep. That's minimal encouragements. It says, I'm tracking, I'm listening, I'm with you. And it's really hard to be mad at someone who's going, yep. And he does like a wobbling doll, and I know what he's doing, but it still calms me down. There's, what else was there? There was asking open-ended questions. One is, tell me more, which Tom has never said to me in his life. And when he would do that, that would also calm me down. And another is using I statements, major psychology 101. But instead of saying, you never clean up, it would be, I wish you would clean up more. And just, it takes away the person feeling oppositional and defensive. If you're saying like, you're a dick, well, automatically they've got their defenses up. But if you're saying, and talking about your feelings, like I constantly say to him, I feel depressed that, you haven't blah, blah, blah. Well, he can't argue with me. If I'm depressed, those are my feelings. Well, you can't fight back, And also saying, I feel blank, it makes him feel more empathetic. Bringing it back to empathy. So we use all of those FBI techniques, and really, they work really well.
I want to give you guys just a couple minutes to ask questions. You can ask about fight tactics. You can ask about troubleshoot something that you're going through, a communication problem, a specific argument you're having. We have the resources here.
Just a quick question. You mentioned at the very beginning that men or your partners are not mind readers, and I believe that very much and have gotten actually very good at asking for exactly what I need, and my husband's gotten very good at doing exactly what I need. But I guess I'm wondering, like, is it a fantasy that after 100 times of asking for the same exact thing, is he ever going to just do it without me asking? Like every single morning, my 6-month-old daughter wakes up and I feed her at 6:30 a.m. in our bed while my husband gets to sleep for an extra 20 minutes. And at the end, I say to him, can you change the diaper? And you'd think after 6 months, he would know that after 12 hours of sleeping, the baby needs a diaper change, and this is his job now. And he does it when I ask, but like, is it a fantasy that like one day he'll just do it?
So he has probably a fantasy that you won't ask him. You're like, he's gonna do it, and his fantasy is you're gonna forget to ask. And I think that that's what happens. Like everybody's got their own thing. You're bringing your own experience to the table. He's bringing his own. He does not know. I guarantee you, if you were to ask him, that is his experience. That one day you're just going to forget to ask.
And she just won't.
And she just won't. Or you'll just do it. Or something. He's got his own fantasy. For sure.
She'll potty train herself.
Right. Right. So she'll just wake up and she won't have 3.5.
Yeah. Is there a way to work
How do you work around that? Yeah.
His own fantasy?
No,
like the fact that you have
him,
different
like, I would love
fantasies.
it if I didn't have to ask you every single day. Do you think you could, like how do you work around that?
I would always figure out what it is that's blocking. Why is it that his fantasy, if he has one, I'm exaggerating, but like, what if his is so completely different from yours? And figure out what is it that you need him to do or to understand that he's not getting. Is it he doesn't want to, he's feeling lazy, he feels inadequate. What is it, where's the disconnect? Why are you asking over and over again? And how is it that it makes you feel versus how is he feeling when you're asking?
And I know this is incredibly hard to entertain and I can't entirely practice what I preach, but what if you woke up, your daughter woke up, and she had a loaded diaper and you didn't change it? What would happen? Like, what if you let her walk around with a loaded diaper and there was pee dripping down the side of her leg, and then she had made a poop and that was also coming out the back? Like, what would it take, right, to get your husband's attention, right? Because I think similar to the story I told in the beginning about the mom who rushed in to make the sandwich, and I know this is hard, my God, and I'm gonna say, do I practice what I preach? I don't know, but like, what if we were just like, okay, you deal with that. You see what it takes to get to the point where, because I think without even trying, because we're nurturing and caring and we're mothers and we feel this innate need to care for our children as infants and toddlers and teenagers, we are always swooping in, and that's beautiful about us. But in the act of swooping in, we're teaching our partner how to swoop out, right? How to rely on us to swoop in. And if we're always the one that's coming in to take care of it, even if we're feeling rageful and resentful, to do it, even though we wish we didn't have to ask, but we're doing it. Whether it's conscious or unconscious, we're sending this message of, I've got this, I don't need you, right? Like, I have this under control, and I am the last person to come in and swoop in for the male species. Trust me, my husband would tell me I'm the biggest man hater either, but I'm not really. But like, at the same time, we do have to let them fumble a little bit to figure it out. And I think that just by design, it's hard for us to do, because we want it to be done the right way in our perception, and we want it to get done, period. And so in that act, our partners learn how to not do it and how to rely on us to just do it. And I'll share an interesting experience that happened earlier, and I'm going to call out my colleague Elizabeth in the back. Before this whole situation happened, today was super busy, and I was in my office dealing with emails, this, that, and the other thing. And because Elizabeth is such a capable person, right? And I think this is another big topic for women. We're capable. We are capable people. And what's the side effect of being capable? Because Elizabeth is capable, I'm like, oh, she's got this. Oh, she's setting up everything. Oh, I'll rush out in a minute. Oh, she's got it. She's got it. And I'm like, why am I leaving this with her? Why is this on her shoulders to do? Because she's capable, because I know she's going to do it? That's not fair, right? Like, I can't just assume she's going to do it because she's capable. And so this is also this rut that I think we as women find ourselves in, is we're capable people, and because we're capable, people rely on us to be capable. And when we're capable and people rely on us to be capable, people back away because we're capable. So it's a catch-22 in a way.
More about behavior than it is about actually finding words, sticking in your cage. It's like, just let them do it.
Yeah. And the swooping in doesn't really help our children either, because we tend to do it with our children too, and we really don't teach them the skills to be independent. Yeah. Right. I mean, we don't, like, if we you know, we do that a lot. Like, we always, I mean, and granted, we had family and other people to like swoop in for us, I guess. But like, one of the things we always wanted to do is we always wanted to leave our kids at some point with someone who wasn't us. We wanted them to know that there was going to be times where we were not always going to be around to pick up every little piece for them, right? And it taught them, okay, I have to rely on my own skills at some point. Now, obviously, when they're babies, they can't do that, right? But like, as they get older, if you're constantly doing stuff for them, like, they don't learn to do things themselves.
Speaking of which, I don't know if this can be related to your husbands, because I'm trying this with my son. But how about creating a chart, like a task list? It's like, I don't know, sometimes it's as simple as that, because obviously if you're having difficulties in getting someone maybe like dividing up the household chores and like the baby chores or whatever, like, I don't know, until they get used to it. Because with my son, I find myself telling him like, okay, move left, move right, do this, do that. And I'm like, I hope like one day when he gets married, like his wife doesn't have to teach him how to like
college again.
Right.
I just want to look at one more question and then we're gonna wrap up.
Quick question. Do you ever or often talk to women who feel like they're sort of on the precipice with their relationship and their husband is like really strong, or their partner thinks everything's a-okay? Is that this disconnect? I mean, you think it's all, the woman thinks it's all just, and the husband thinks, wait, what are you talking about?
Well, the people that I tend to see.
Did everyone hear the question?
No, I don't ever meet people that are so completely disconnected, where the woman thinks the marriage is falling apart and the man thinks everything is great. But there is often a disconnect in perception and experience. There's clearly a different set of priorities, a different sort of like schema set that people bring into their relationship, where they see their interaction as more within the normal range, and the other person will think this is completely messed up and not at all what I wanted. And I think like that's where the work comes in, and I sort of throw around the word empathy, but I think what's missing in a lot of relationships is that core sense of understanding one another and truly taking the time to feel what the other person is feeling and understand why the experience is so different.
And you don't have to do that alone, right? No. Like, look, everybody, I've been in therapy for 20 years. I've been in couples counseling for I don't know how long, right? Like, relationships are hard, they take work, and if you have to go to a professional or somebody to help you work through this, having a baby is the hardest thing ever on a relationship. And you have the statistics on, relationships that end up in divorce, which I don't wish on anybody, but like, it's hard. And so if you need to go and speak to somebody, which can be really helpful when you have an independent force negotiating both of your sides, who's not taking, anybody's side in particular, but just a third party, it can be really helpful. It doesn't mean that your relationship is in ruins. It means that you've hit a milestone and you've hit a boundary and a barrier, and you need help to negotiate that and navigate that. And that's okay. Like, sometimes we hit these roadblocks in life where we don't feel like we can move beyond them. We need a little bit of extra help. And that's okay.
There are many brilliant therapists in New York.
Yeah.
We're very lucky.
And you can do them on a sliding scale. A lot of the, because people get weirded out about the money a lot, right? But many do it on a sliding scale, right? Where absolutely you can negotiate a fee sometimes.
Can I just advocate for, if anyone's heard of ICPNY, it's a great place to start if you cannot afford therapy.
Yeah.
No, hands down.
There are many low-fee clinics and training clinics in the city that are available to people who can't afford therapy, for sure. Yeah. There's really great resources.
And Paige, Partners Group.
Partners Group.
Because it's low committal, low fee, open to the public for all partners. Is it 25 or 50?
It's 25. We offer a Partners Group here for partners, your partners, that also might be having a tough time negotiating your relationship. It's $25 a session. It's every Friday at 9:45 here until 10:30. But just another, during the day, in the morning. Just another example. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there, and when you seek treatment and intervention, it doesn't mean you're weak, you're not making it. It means that you're willing to ask for help, right? Which is ultimately what we all need.
The other thing I keep thinking about, and there was a comment earlier too about just being so tired, and I feel like there's the two different layers, one being just like, how do you strategize? How do you do this? How do you do that? Or, whether, and then the other things like whether it's sex or just quality time, non-sex, all those things. There's all that, but there's also just the whole hierarchy of like, are you getting sleep?
Yes.
Right? Like, are you getting, like, and everybody's situation is so different, but for us, we had no family on either side. We both worked. I was working 60 hours a week. A husband who didn't do any help, and I feel like I was drowning for so long. My little one's 4 now, but I feel like I was in such a fog that I could not see clearly, and I wish somebody had told me, go on care.com, beg anyone you can to have someone come in and watch the kid for a frickin' afternoon or an entire day or whatever you can do, swap it out with somebody, do anything, but I couldn't think clearly enough. And I just think so much of this, there is the whole, again, all the things we're talking about, strategies, but there's also just the all the care that we all need as moms, that we are just, so many of us, not everyone, but so many of us are just not getting. And if you're not getting that, this other stuff can't happen. You know what I mean? You have to have the basics first.
So if your partner isn't going to take some of that load off of you, you have to outsource it somehow.
Like, do what you have to do.
Because you can't survive without that help. So you guys, we could keep talking, but I know that everyone has things to do, and I really want to thank you all for coming out tonight and being a part of Not Safe for Mom group at the Motherhood Center and being in this really important conversation that we need to keep having. We need to keep checking in with each other. We need to keep checking in with ourselves and with our partners, because it's important. If we don't have someone to do this with, it gets even harder. The load is even harder. And if we aren't taking care of ourselves, it's even immensely harder. So thank you. Thanks to our wonderful panelists. Of Jancee's books. Jancee, you'll be signing some? Sure. Yay! And also thank you to Williamsburg Pizza, for providing the delicious slices that are here tonight. And I'll be sticking around if you have any questions. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much.
Yes. Oh my God, what a smile.
world. So my husband, Brian Oakes,